listeners know, worked with many of these German scientists at Lockheed Martin outside Denver, Colorado, in the mountains in the early 1960s, late 1950s. And would he ever get an education? And I have a feeling that there's going to be a crossover of information on this particular point. So, Steve, I want to welcome you to the show. Thanks for coming on. This segment is brought to you by, and guess who? Renaissance Precious Metals. At Steve's company, the best in gold and silver and other precious metals trading. And, folks, the economy is ready to tank. I just did an interview this afternoon where I talked about the details of this. And if you're not out of cash, if you're not out of your bank account, if you're not out of the dollar soon, you're going to be in trouble. And Renaissance Precious Metals is the place to go. Steve Quayle is your guy, and I'll be giving you that contact information at the bottom of the hour. Steve, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Dave. I think we're at a historic point where all the warnings and all of the admonitions, all the evidence, all the links, every single interview that you've done, I've done, that we've done, the interviews that have gone on, the different highly placed guests, the people who have to stay in the background in order for their lives to be spared, we are now facing what I believe is the introduction of the full-scale Islamic invasion and not immigration. I refuse to, outside of just defining why I say invasion, I refuse to refer to it any longer as immigration. Now, before we get into Operation High Jump, I'll just wet everyone's whistle. During World War II, the Nazis had kind of a, if you will, a love-hate for the Arabs, but they realized that they could be useful. And even Hitler's own words would not so much befriend the Nazis to the Arabs, but they both hated Israel and they hated the Jews. But tonight I want to open this up. This is from Carroll in North Carolina. This puts everything into perspective. You know, I believe that every single military officer, whether he's flag or whether he's general, you know, high-ranking officers, they knew and they could have spoken up that Obama wasn't allowed to be president. Even Bill Clinton said that early on in the campaign. But this is from Carroll in North Carolina. I'm not sure I know which Carroll, but here's what she said. When you read this is critical. When you read this, you'll understand why Obama refused to say the words radical Islam. Did you know what we now have as a Muslim government? John Brennan, current head of the CIA, converted to Islam while stationed in Saudi Arabia. Obama's top advisor, Valerie Jarrett, is a Muslim who was born in Iran, where her parents still live. Hillary Clinton's top advisor, Huma Abedin, is a Muslim whose mother and brother are involved in the now outlawed Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Assistant Secretary for Policy Development for Homeland Security, Arif Khan, is a Muslim. Homeland Security Advisor Mohammed El-Biari is a Muslim. Obama advisor and founder of the Muslim Public Affairs Council, Salam al-Mariyati, is a Muslim. Obama's Sharia czar, Imam Mohammed Magid, of the Islamic Society of North America, is a Muslim. Advisory Council on Faith-Based Neighborhood Partners, Ibu Patel, is a Muslim. And last but not least, our closet Muslim himself, Barack Hussein Obama. It's questionable if Obama ever officially took the oath of office when he was sworn in. He didn't repeat the oath properly to defend our nation, our Constitution. Later, the Democrats claimed he was given the oath again in private. CIA Director John Brennan took his oath on a copy of the Constitution, not a Bible. Congressman Keith Ellison took his oath on a copy of the Quran. Congressman Michelle Bachmann was vilified and almost tarred and feathered by Democrats when she voiced her concern about Muslims taking over our government. Considering all these appointments, it would explain why Obama and his minions are systematically destroying our nation, supporting radical Muslim groups worldwide, opening our southern border, and turning a blind eye to the genocide being perpetrated on Christians all over Africa and the Middle East. The more Obama damage he does, the more arrogant he's become. Our nation, our government has been infiltrated by people who want to destroy us. It will only get worse. By the way, she writes, plus, John Kerry's son-in-law is an Iranian Muslim. Had enough? So the point being is that we're dealing now, Dave, with the full-scale invasion of the United States. We're sitting back as Christians, in my opinion, preparing to get slaughtered. And as you've tried to warn, I've tried to warn over some 20-some years on talk radio, this day would come. We've seen literally the Communist Manifesto being put into full operation and to simply overrun the system. The military is now, just even today, there are stories coming out. They're preparing for unparalleled civil unrest in the United States. And so this all plays into our subject matter and our topic tonight, Operation High Jump, actually how the Nazis won World War II, and I believe that with all my heart. You've talked extensively about John F. Kennedy, his assassination. I have a chapter in my book on that. And by the way, this is well documented. I think there's 422 footnotes. And I don't go and reinvent the wheel, Dave. I take the guys who are absolutely expert in their field. And, for instance, Nick Cook, when he wrote Zero Point Energy, most people find it hard to believe that in 1947 and the Antarctic, the United States went to war with Germany, even now, remember 1946, forgive me, but that's after the official close of World War II, and we absolutely got our butt kicked, and with a new form of technology that were basically German flying saucers, they had figured out how to overcome gravity with electrogravitics, and the idea that they had an under-the-ice base that was built during the closing years of World War II and was carried on into the 50s and 60s is something that most people simply can't grasp. So tonight, as you and I speak, Dave, I'm asking people to literally pray, take it to the Lord in prayer, because if anyone watches the London Daily Mail or the Daily Express or any non-U.S. papers, the subject of Hitler, the fact he didn't die, it's on television almost nightly, depending on which channel's carrying it, The Search of Hitler, The Lost Years, all of this subject matter that people thought was just left to history is now coming back. And I submit to everybody, when you understand the genetic experiments that Dr. Mengele was taking part in, and that Hitler was supposedly, he died, some people say 1962, some people say 1969. But the key in understanding is this, that there is a group that collects DNA from all the most famous, what they would consider brigands or evil men. At some point they intend to reconstitute them and reanimate them. And somebody sent me an email saying that there was a cartoon, I'm not sure if it was G.I. Joe or something like that, the point being where they were talking about this very thing 8 years ago in the cartoons. And now, instead of cartoons, we're seeing it in video games. So we're being absolutely and methodically prepared for the very evil that most people don't even understand exists by a supranatural intelligence, that means beyond normal, with some of the most evil people, including Adolf Hitler, coming back on the scene.
Steve, I've got some breaking news I would like to share with you that I became in possession of, some of it last night and some of it today, and I'd like your comment because I think this relates right in. This is from one of my very best military sources, my main Benghazi source, someone I've known for almost 13 years. And what I have learned is that what I've been saying all along is correct, is that we're going to have a Tet Offensive kind of attack with terrorists, several locations, same day. And we are also looking at that being the precursor event to a Red Dawn kind of invasion. Are you getting anything like this as well?
Oh, absolutely, Dave. And the thing that's interesting, I think everybody needs to ask the basic question. Why is the total focus of gun control basically being aimed, pun intended, at white Anglo-Saxon Protestants? Now, that's not a race-based statement. That is a practical statement. You and I have done shows together. We've written independently together about all the prepositioned munitions, ammunition, firearms, etc., that DHS bought and then has stationed strategically throughout the country. Do you also remember, Dave, talking about all the prisoners that were released from the different prisons and all of the hardened criminals, including murderers and rapists that were released?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This is the recipe for mayhem. And ladies and gentlemen, here's the issue. The issue is the FBI does know where the 22 or 46 or 222 bases are that the Muslims are training, and not one word is being said about that. And when we watch the slaughter, by the way, the situation that took place in California, there was a third person. If everybody will look at all of the tragic shootings or mass shootings, there's always an eyewitness or multiples of eyewitnesses that see the third guy. That's in the world of spooks, meaning the intelligence world. That's a handler. He makes sure that the MK Ultra shooters or those who have been handled end up dead, and they always seem to escape. Now, I posted an alert on my website, stevequayle.com, talking about the fact is that supposedly the media and police were clued in that they didn't want the third shooter being identified because people will panic. Well, that's, horse manure.
Yeah,
the point is that you and I and so many others, and I'm not just saying us, but I'm saying all those in the truth movement have warned and warned and warned. And now we have it playing out. And I want people to understand this. It's going to be the Red Dawn. It is going to be beyond Red Dawn. And one of the things that was interesting, Red Dawn, the invasion had to bring the troops in during the invasion. Unfortunately, we are already seeing troops, whether the Russians, Chinese, whoever, have been pre-positioned here. Now add in the drug cartels, add in all of the other than Mexicans, OTMs. And by the way, my statements tonight are directed against those who are coming in as terrorists. I want it to be understood. I do not believe all immigrants are terrorists. I believe the terrorists are coming in as immigrants. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I've said the same thing, Steve. I got vilified last April when I took up the judicial report that identified an ISIS base camp 8 miles from El Paso, 3 miles on the south side of the border, and I said they were partnered with Hamas and Hezbollah and ISIS, and they were coming across the border with immigrants. Steve, it's kind of funny. In this business, I'm sure you've experienced this a lot more than I have. What you say one year that you get crucified for, people don't even want to give you credit for it the next year.
Oh, no, look, they hate, I can't say this about you, but based on what you've shared with me, they hate me without a cause, okay? And Jesus said, and this is tough words to take from Jesus, blessed are you when all men speak evil of you for my name's sake. Dave, we're in this predicament because the Christians wimped out. We're in this position because the pulpits of America turned into politically correct sewage pits. The pulpits of America were to be manned by men of God, not, behold. It was said of Dante's Inferno, abandon hope, all ye who enter here. Unfortunately, American pulpits have become neutered zones, There is no longer any, I would say, backbone or testosterone or even a smidgen of it in the biggest expression churches. I'm not talking about true followers of Jesus. I'm talking about what the mainstream and the biggest ones are trying to embrace Islam. Can I say this? That's like a guy going up and knitting his own, or not knitting, but tying his own rope that's going to hang him, or polishing the guillotine blade that's going to cut his head off, or, basically conspiring and yielding to all the plans for our own destruction. And unfortunately, people still don't get it, Dave. You can write about that the Illuminati wants to kill off 6 billion people, 5 billion, whatever their numbers are. It obviously increases as the population increases. Yet the point being is that people don't believe. They don't believe. We warned about EMPs. What haven't we warned about? But, Dave, I got to tell you, this is the Nazi war plan. And people said, well, who really is the Illuminati? During the years leading up to World War II, Hitler was into so many of the secret societies, and they were so many of Hitler's, if you will, cronies were followers of Blavatsky, followers of Aleister Crowley. One of the followers of Hitler was Crowley's personal secretary, Mr. 666. We have the absolute records of these guys busting through into other dimensions. And I don't know, have you ever seen Hellboy, the movie with Ron Perlman?
No, I didn't see it.
Hellboy. I'm not recommending people do, but you might be able to go on YouTube and just check the opening scene because it has two Nazis. It's kind of like Raiders of the Lost Ark busting through into Stargates. And the Nazis made contact with so many what I would call supernatural evil entities who gave them so much instruction. By the way, it's interesting, Dietrich Eckhart, E-C-K-H-A-R-T, I think, made the statement that they were in a seance, and just a normal, basically, maid who was a psychic went into a coma. This is all in my book, and basically ghosts proceeded out of her private parts and dictated for hours high technology and other things that were going to be happening, and certain people there were sitting taking notes. Now, people might find that offensive, but Dave, every single day I'm contacted by people who are having supernatural events like nothing they've ever known before in their life. And if you and I and others are talking about how evil has ramped up, how it's multiplied, how it's absolutely now pervading everything, I can tell you that there's something going on that is beyond anything that's ever been seen in the world before, and Jesus made that statement, okay? Look, if the men of God would stand up for the Lord, even in the military, I don't know, I know this, that Jesus said, let your yeas be yeas and your nays be nay. For anything more than that proceedeth out of sin. And, that was spoken in the context of taking oaths. And now we're talking about oath takers and oath breakers. And if Obama did not say, and I don't believe he did, I believe he is the quintessential agent of change. I was going to say angel of death, that too. But the reason I refer to him as the entity in the slaughterhouse, if you see that even his statement today, he was trying to cover, make some of the people that still think he's a Christian, and he's not. Jesus said, by their fruits ye shall know them. The contempt he has for Christians, you can go on you can go on YouTube and read all his quotes. So now we have the whole idea before us that we are going to be simply overrun, and as you say, we're going to have a red dawn, but we're also going to have collective events, and he will, I had one of my listeners before I went on the radio with you, sent me an email, and he said, Steve, won't it be interesting to go word by word and see what he has already given his orders, whether subliminal or not? And Dave, I used to wonder, and I'm sure your listeners did too, why Obama always uses a teleprompter. Well, in my book, and this is critical, page 338, when I'm talking about the God panels, do you remember the story when CERN had giant glass panels or a crystal panel with different languages that were being flashed from the back to the front of the tunnel or to the front of the target? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that, yes.
Yes, and the thing is that the idea that the Germans perfected, and DARPA did too, the fact that crystalline structures not only can store energy. This isn't New Age stuff. This is physics. I would put everybody in remembrance that you don't have lasers without crystals, okay? Light amplification by the stimulated emission of radiation. So the CERN people took a cue from the Nazis and DARPA. In essence, they were trying to communicate with the entities that some of the CERN scientists said are showing up. Now, this is pretty important because what we're seeing now is that if people understood that even television sets, our computer screens, iPods, they all have the ability to produce and provide and actually emit infrasonics and even beyond those frequencies to influence our thoughts. I believe this, honestly, given the fact that the American youth have traded what I would call empiric reality for virtual reality, tells me they have succeeded. So what we're talking about is all the advanced Nazi technology. And what I'm saying, there are a lot of people who've written books on Hitler, Dave. There's a lot of people who've written books on flying saucers. There's a lot of people who have written on a lot of these different subject matters, but they've never put it all together. I started on this book 8 months ago, and then it was interesting to me that, again, the London Daily Mail started, I believe it was, the whole thing, Hitler never died. It might interest people that Stalin, I'll quote him, kind of, that bastard got away. Eisenhower said there's not one shred of truth to believe that Hitler died in the bunker. Hitler and Eva Braun were also known to have body doubles, okay? And it might be surprising to people to know that so do specific high-ranking individuals in our government have body doubles.
Listen, Steve, as we went to the break, you were talking about the fact that Hitler probably never died, and a lot of reports say he might have lived, at least what I've read, until as long as 1970, and I want to get your take on that. But you think he escaped because he was able to fake his death with body doubles? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, not only that, but the thing is that the technology that went into building the Antarctic world beneath the ice is so incredibly well documented, Dave. For instance, you know, the thing that's fascinating is that if people understood just the German U-boats that they had some of their supply submarines that were as big as our aircraft carriers, okay? Now, people can't embrace that because they always think of just the smaller U-boats like 239 and some of the ones. And by the way, according to official records, there were 49 to 50 U-boats unaccounted for. But what was really more telling and compelling was that during the years that even prior to the official surrender by Germany, the German industrials, you're going to love this, the bankers and all the leading pharmaceutical cartels knew that the official war would end, but they had determined to set up their headquarters, if you will, in different parts of the world and to get their Führer out of sight and out of mind. By the way, Joseph Mengele was never found either. And Mengele was known for being in both Argentina, Brazil, and he absolutely was in a town that even the mainstream press tried to excuse as a rare genetic disorder. The records of South American investigators absolutely puts the very town in Brazil that has hundreds of sets of twins at the hands of Joseph Mengele. So if Joseph Mengele was able to clone and induce twin fertilization, amongst other things, and people have got to understand something, that was the real quick and dirty, what was that, almost 55, it was 70 years ago. And what's fascinating, now this is what most people don't know, that Mengele would stand at the train station, what was known as the ramp, obviously the platform that had an angle that brought the people up. And he was looking, as well as the Ahnenerbe, which basically was the ancient history of the German race for, you'll love this, dwarfs, giants, and anybody who had very abnormal features. So they knew something, and my whole pretext of this book is there have been people that have written about God's beasts and Nazis. There are people that have written about everything on the Third Reich. But what I find interesting today, out of the blue, somebody sends me a report, and the report is that even the Russians now have a flotilla headed to the Antarctic. It's my contention, Dave, that the Antarctic, with saucers that could fly, even some of the blueprints that were found, some of these flying saucers could fly at 25,000 miles an hour. That's pretty fast, okay? And if you remember Dr. Werner von Braun and what you just mentioned about your dad working for Lockheed, the head of Lockheed was a Nazi. You know, this is what most people don't understand. The German intelligentsia and who's who. We took the people, the Russians took the machinery, dismantled complete factories, but the point being is that when I say how the Nazis won World War II, I can back it up. And here's what's missing in most I'd say, overviews of history. What people have got to understand is what the Aryans were looking for, Hitler was looking for, Goebbels was looking for, or Goebbels, whatever, Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS. All of these guys were deeply into the occult. As a matter of fact, it was brought up at the Nuremberg war trials, and guess what? There were just a few snickers. So when you look at the absolute effect of some of the most, and I would say this, truly powerful occult figures, it's no wonder that the deception was so great. And I maintain that whole deception carried forth into the United States, and to the large degree, our entire military-industrial complex. The Nazis may have lost the battle, but they won the war.
Well, I would basically agree with that too. And it started right at the end of World War II, the fighting part, when they brought so many of them over here. And you mentioned Werner von Braun. Well, he's the tip of the iceberg. I asked my father, I said, how many German scientists were there involved in these programs working with people like yourself? And he said he wasn't sure, but he knew of at least 50. He said he actually sat down and started cataloging what he'd seen, what he'd known, what he knew, and what he came across in paperwork. And he said there were at least 50 working groups like this. And he said, and that's just what I know by happenstance. Steve, there might have been hundreds.
Well, my research would multiply that by 4, okay? Because it's literally possible, Dave, to take the major scientific projects that came out after the Manhattan Project, and people say, well, they could never keep that quiet. When General Groves headed up the Manhattan Project, it was kept amazingly quiet, okay? That was in the days of the slogan, loose lips sink ships. So, as you know, even your dad would have been compartmentalized to some degree. Mm-hmm. Those who were over this, remember, that was, too, during the years that Majestic 12 was set up. People deny it exists. It really exists. Stanton Friedman, those guys, they were given documents, and those are real documents. I've interviewed so many guys behind the scene. And by the way, just for the sake of all those listening in, I don't care who they are, meaning their names or addresses or anything. My critics have always said, well, these are just made-up people because you won't say their name. I actually challenged one guy. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll go on talk radio with one of them's permission. You will give me $1 million, not me. It will be put into a trust fund for his wife and family. The wife and family must be put into seclusion and hiding someplace in the world, and then, he's willing to lay down his life to shut you up. And guess what? It never shut him up, I was ready to have a 4-star general come on the radio. I've said this before. We had satellite uplinks. I know. I'm the one that bought some of them. And we had the entire way to demodulate his voice and run him through multiple things that even, would have given the NSA a challenge. And unfortunately, Dave, a couple really idiot, belligerent guys came on. I think it may have even been the only time, 1 or 2 times I was ever on a blog or whatever. I had my own, what's a written chat room called? It's been so long ago.
I don't know because I don't go on them.
Yeah, I don't either, but the point being, and the general got a hold of me. He said, Steve, he said, I know what you want to do, but if they won't believe the obvious, they can't receive what I was going to tell them. And my heart broke, but I had to agree, and by the way, I still think he listens into these broadcasts. So, General N., you were absolutely correct. I was wrong. And, Dave, I thought if I could give the bona fides, verifiable bona fides, then the people would, realize that this stuff is real. But guess what? If like Jesus said, this is one of my most important scriptures I've quoted for 20 years. Jesus said, if I've told you earthly things and you believe me not, how can I tell you heavenly things? If people won't see right now what's going on with Obama, let me read this, okay? I asked one of my federal law enforcement friends to, basically this guy's, a tremendous brother in the Lord, and he said this. I said, so what do you say about guns? I'm on the radio with Dave Hodges. And he said, basically, he said that we're not at war with Islam, a lie, that Congress should ban semi-automatic weapons, wrong, if you're on the no-fly list and you shouldn't be able to buy a gun, wrong, and that we shouldn't discriminate against Muslims. Discriminate against them, they're killing the believers right and left around the world, and he will not even speak out or speak up for the Christians and won't allow, 50 Syrians into the United States? And that we should embrace Muslims. And then I started screaming at the TV. This is what my friend said about his gun control bull, you-know-what. And he also said that all the coalitions of controls fighting ISIS are doing a great job at it, and never once mentioned Russia and their involvement. I'm utterly embarrassed to be an American law enforcement officer and that all nations judge us based on his actions or lack thereof. That came in at 6:31, 6:32. So,
yeah.
how does that relate to us tonight? Okay, well, understand this: that after 1947 and our defeat at basically the whole Operation High Jump, and even the Russians put out in 2006 a documentary, and they actually had some film of Nazi saucers basically taking out U.S. planes and sinking a U.S. ship, okay? These things could go instantly, and they could dive into the water and come out of the water. And they almost taunted, actually, Admiral, by the way, people don't understand this, Admiral Perry wasn't a flake. This guy was one of the nation's heroes. This is one of the polar explorers. And so the thing is that after Operation High Jump, the point is there was kind of a rash of UFO sightings, and remember even Roswell, etc. But that came after this. So what my basis of statement is that Hitler went throughout the world with the Ahnenerbe, forgive my mispronouncing of German, and the thing is that people all over the vast corners of the planet looking for religious relics, like the spear that pierced Jesus' side, looking for the chalice, of the Last Supper, looking for the Ark of the Covenant, looking for ancient flying machines out of mythology. He had a group, if you will, of intensely brilliant men scouring the world for artifacts, but also scouring the world for ancient technology. And so this is why it's important that people understand this. So after Operation Paperclip, you've got the Germans here, you've got all the occult, if you will, background in these individuals, and you've got reverse engineering. Then you basically have got the whole revelation of the hollow earth inside the earth, Nazi stargates, and it all leads to CERN. And then we've got, the whole, listen, this is something that people don't understand, is that you've got the occult secrets. Even there are those who knew Hitler that said he made the statement that the Prince of Darkness had entered into him, okay? Now, it's interesting that people want to deny this. So that it's my contention that as all of these Nazi scientists and intel agents were welcomed into this country, they began to take over the intelligence apparatus. And remember this, what was it? The OSS was the Office of Strategic Services, and the SS insignia, two lightning bolts, that really stood for the Black Sun. The Black Sun was believed to be at the center of the Earth in if you will, the light, the energy source that controlled, and when I say the underworld, I'm not talking about hell, I'm talking about all of the ancient civilizations and their records of all those, if you will, entities that live under the Earth. So, naturally people say, man, I don't believe in a hollow Earth. Well, guess what? Just last week, I think it was, 3 or 4 days ago, they showed a hole again over the North Pole. And the last time they showed that was in the ESSA satellite in the 70s, okay? So what I'm saying is, in the last 30-some years, that hole had never been observed. Now, that's the same thing they're talking about in the Antarctic. So what most people have never put two and two together, because, of course, no longer can 2 and 2 be 4 with the core curriculum, because you've got to question the basis. How could 2 and 2 be 4 when 2 can stand alone, blah, 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 okay? Yeah. And I maintain the core curriculum of the entire educational system that's bought into it, practices it, or teaches it has literally bought in and brought in the devil's educational system to absolutely be participants in their own destruction.
It's amazing, but we are the harbingers of our own doom. Our own ignorance, Steve, is to blame for where we are. I'm reminded, how many people did Moses convert in 120 years of Christianity? About 8. That's how I feel like Moses. When I try to tell people about what's going on today, and you got to have the same feelings, I feel like Moses.
Well, I just want to. Well, first of all, Moses. I think don't you mean Noah? Because Noah was the only guy that.
Yes.
Yeah, well, let me say this on how many people converted. It appears to me from the scripture that Moses, basically half of Israel perished because they followed the people that attacked the man of God. And, basically God says in the Old Testament, stand aside, Moses, who is on the Lord's side, let him come to me, and that's the same thing that Joshua echoes in the first couple chapters of Joshua. So what's fascinating, Dave, is that and let's just deal with Noah. The reason why Noah was saved, it wasn't because they were, moral pinnacles of righteousness. It says in the Bible, the Old Testament, that they were perfect in their generations. That meant they did not have the fallen angel genetic corruption. And the whole earth was corrupt. And guess what? Not only were human beings corrupted, but every manner of bird, every manner of animal, everything. And by the way, now look what's happening. I put on my website, I didn't put up the story because it was too gross. But right now, the number one sin and breaking of the law in Switzerland is basically bestiality, and the poor dogs and horses don't have a chance. Now, brother, that's sick, okay? But when you're dealing with fallen angels who are a supernatural being to begin with, and part of that, whatever energy that they possess, transmits into their offspring, and you can understand this, that's why God said, curses a man that lies with a beast, that both he and the beast should be put to death. Because God was trying to prevent what would come out of that union. And Dave, we're right back there today. And it makes me want to vomit, okay? It truly does. It is that pathetic.
Well,
it only gets worse.
Who are the perpetrators of this major crime of bestiality? I would willing to bet it's probably the immigrants. Am I right?
Well, in Switzerland, it's the very elite. Okay. Now, when you're talking about, I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't clear with you. When you're talking about immigrants, you're talking about rape, and I think most people who are of Scandinavian origin would be disgusted to see what's happened to Norway and Sweden. I just even put up a story today about a guy, and he's a smirking Muslim that has raped. Isn't it amazing that Obama will defend the rights of gays and lesbians, but he won't say a word about ISIS throwing homosexuals off of buildings? And for the record, I think that's absolutely wrong. Yet, how can he be so selective? Well, the answer is an agenda. He's got an agenda. He has an agenda. So tonight he goes on the radio. Now, I haven't watched it. Obviously, I'm on with you, and we're doing this show live. But basically, you got to get rid of those assault rifles. Ladies and gentlemen, I want everybody to go tonight to survivalblog.com. That's one word, survivalblog, blog.com. And I want you to read James Wesley Rawls' Fighting Words, an open letter to publisher Arthur Sulzberger Jr. He absolutely lays it down. God bless James Wesley Rawls. I'll tell you this, Dave, that we've seen what happens to unarmed people with Muslim terrorists. And what I think people must understand is this is orchestrated, it's well-funded, and the whole plan is to get the Muslims to kill the Christians and the Jews, and then at the time the Illuminists want to get rid of the Muslims, they just do it with a biological weapon that's specifically designed for the specific genetic markers of Arabs. Now, look, I wrote the book on that called Breathe No Evil years ago, and also Genetic Armageddon over a decade, maybe almost a decade and a half ago. And when Wouter Basson and this is critical because this is stuff that came out of the Nazis in South Africa, okay? He was tried on what was it called? War crimes. And the Operation Coast, C-O-A-S-T, look it up. And they had so perfected bioweapons that were race and gene specific. Now, this is years ago, okay, that basically they could take out any specific group with any definable biological markers. Now, I don't know if you ever looked into that, Dave, but this goes right into, and some people say, well, I quote World War III by Albert Pike and Mazzini, and they said, yeah, that's fake. Well, it may be not attributed to who they say it's attributed to, but it's going by the book, as Johnny Cash said. Someone's following that script to a T. In essence, we are seeing World War III. And I love all the pundits. This isn't dangerous. We have overflights and airplanes disappearing. I think there are over, 220 penetrations of U.S. airspace? I think Putin's been, and I know that you and I may have a little different opinion of him, and by the way, I understand who he is, but I also understand that the technology that the Russians now, Soviets then, have is exemplary technology. Remember this, ladies and gentlemen, they played dead for pretty much more than a decade, and during that they were getting all kinds of money from the West, and they developed some of the most amazing weapon systems. You remember when the Donald S. Cook was brought to a complete standstill? I think that was, in the Black Sea about a year ago. Remember that?
I do, yes.
And then they were also able to, with some form of extreme low frequency, cause one of our nuclear subs to have to surface, okay? And the only way you could do that is take control of their controls. So here's the thing. We know this. Whether people want to believe that God is real, whether they don't believe, here's what they're going to have to deal with. Pretty soon, they're going to have to deal with the fact that the events spelled out for the end times in the book of Revelation, and I said this on Coast to Coast the other night, the book of Revelation is a revelation of Jesus Christ which God gave to his servant John, who was one of the disciples who was, in exile on the island of Patmos. So when people quote that, they always want to leave out Jesus, and I tell them this, I said, listen, that's like you guys will quote the scripture, ye shall know the truth shall set you free, but that's not the whole scripture. The true scripture is, if ye abide in me and my word abides in you, then ye shall know the truth will set you free. And by the way, when I hear a liar saying that, I said, you neither know him, obey him, or will follow him, ye shall know the truth. When someone says that, and they're a bunch of liars like, the typical politician, I want to submit something. I caused a lot of trouble. I'm not taking that as my, I was told by some very powerful people in the military that when I suggested the only way you could understand how the Senate and Congress could go along with all this stuff as almost willing automatons and beyond bribes, beyond blackmail, I said this, and I guess that was what caused an uproar. I said, what makes you think all these people are truly real people? And so if you're hearing the Chinese, by the way, anything you see, ladies and gentlemen, in scientific announcements, advancements, when it comes to genetic engineering, it's already been done, probably 50 years ago at least. So, Dave, they're floating it, they're accelerating it, gene editing, The point being is pretty soon, ladies and gentlemen, you won't know if you're even dealing with what was once a human or is now an updated human, an H+, or a replacement, won't be human, but a replacement entity. So when people give themselves over to occult possession, they cease to be the dominant control in the body they occupy, and something else takes control. I am convinced, Dave, that we are seeing this lived out, played out. Most of you that watched it or will watch it on TV will watch it in real time, and that who's to say what was not said? Not one word of sympathy came from the lynch mob. By the way, I now refer to her as Loretta Lynch Mob, okay? If she isn't impeached immediately, to put out a hit on anybody that will speak. Let's bring it in the court of public, if you will, view. Let's get the imams and let's get the Bible scholars. Come on, you guys. Where are you to challenge this? So what I'm saying is Loretta Lynch mob now is basically just put the din mak, and I think you're a martial artist, so you know what that is. That's the death touch upon anybody that dares to question the Islamic takeover of the United States.
Well, she did say it. It's chilling, Steve, and I'm going to have a lot of responses to what you said. You just knocked down about 20 different issues. By the way, I've got a text that was sent to me, and we'll come out of the top of the hour break on this. Obama's not really going after gun control in his speech tonight. He says he's going after ISIS and dealing with terrorism. I think the independent media backed him down. We'll be back in hour number 2 with Steve Quayle. Stay tuned. I don't even know where to start. I mean, you just lined up about 20 different targets in the last half hour and knocked them all down. I want to go back to something you said, though, quite some time back in the first hour, and you talked about the North Pole, and I have written about this extensively. The Russians are there, and they are there in force, and I thought for a long time they were only there for the gold and silver because the ice caps are moving, where the planet's rotation is changing. That's opening up a lot of mineral fields that were previously unknown, and I thought that's the sole reason why they were there. But after hearing you talk, and after hearing you describe how the Nazis had this fascination with the North Pole, I think the Russians are there to rediscover history.
Well, absolutely, Dave, and it's interesting, isn't it, that on my website, maybe 3 days ago, you can look up the hole in the Arctic that has all the satellite photos, because a lot of these people that, say the Earth isn't round and they don't understand electron spin rate, they don't understand that everything's subatomic particles are in circular orbits. They'll probably claim those are not real either. But let me read this to you, because this is in page 361 of my book. Everybody wants to criticize, and they never want to do their own homework. So I have made, Churchill said this. Remember, I'm paraphrasing him, history is written by the victors, but that doesn't mean it has anything to do with the truth, okay? In other words, when you're victorious, you can put your spin on anything. But a writer in Spirit Daily noted, Hitler was an occultist, and like many who practiced black arts, there was strong indication that he was possessed by demons, and had been since boyhood. Some have even wondered if he was a victim of ritual abuse. During his Catholic confirmation ceremony at a cathedral in Linz, Hitler turned sulky and surly, repulsed by the holy ritual. He developed an aversion to Christianity, which he later wanted to eliminate. Gee, that sounds like somebody who may be, occupying the slaughterhouse. As a boy, Adolf had been prone to satanic trances. He'd turn pale, take on a sinister countenance, and launch into impassioned speeches with a hoarse and raucous voice. It was as if another being spoke out of his body and moved him as much as it did me, recalled a friend named August Kubizek. It was not all a case of a speaker carried away by his own words. I rather felt as though he himself listens with astonishment and emotion to that which burst forth from him with elementary force. A similar trance had occurred when Hitler was recovering from war injuries in the Prussian Military Reserve Hospital at Pasewalk. There he heard voices that told him that he was Germany's Messiah. Such voices were also to tell him to exterminate the Jews. He had a deep connection with old Hun-like magic, runic symbols, and was obsessed with the ancient Nordic god Wodan, or Wotan, the god of destruction. Now, what is the patron saint of CERN? And when I say saint, what is the patron demon of CERN?
I don't know.
Shiva. The god Shiva.
Oh, you know what? That was in the movie Ghostbusters.
Yep. And Shiva, the four-armed entity is, now listen to this, it is the god of destruction and recreation. What is the Illuminati's motto? Order ad chaos, order out of chaos. John Kerry declared to the world that he's an Illuminist, okay? And obviously his son-in-law is also a Muslim. Gee, And I think, good night. What is it? Prince Charles has converted to Islam. You know? I don't know if people know that, but he has. And so the point being is there's something that's happening. And unfortunately, we're in that biblical time, and not unfortunately that it's in the biblical time, but unfortunately people do not see the lateness of the hour. They do not understand that when people turn away, and here's where I differ from every talk radio show host, except maybe you're getting there. I know Alex has gotten there. I saw his emergency update today. We used to think if we could warn people, we could wake them up. Not true, Dave, because they're given over to an illusion, and God said He will choose their delusions. In other words, when people willingly choose to avoid the truth of the gospel, the presentation of the gospel, and the Word of God, then the devil's free to come in. You know, remember when Jesus said, "Get thee behind me, Satan"? Mm-hmm. That literally means follow after. It's interesting because those of you who have been, I'm speaking now to your general audience, those of you who have been in the deliverance ministry used by the power of God to set people free of evil spirits and evil presence, you know, you'll know that it's not something you do, but it's something that God gives us the ability to do when we believe in Him. By the way, Jesus said this, "If I cast out demons by the finger of God, that means that the kingdom of God has come to you this day." I submit the people who pray the Lord's Prayer would probably tremble in the idea that maybe they'd have to encounter this stuff. And what I'm saying, Dave, is as the stargates are opened, and I go into great detail on the stargates, great detail on them, as we see CERN and as we see the absolute, if you will, the symbol of CERN is the God of, and I would call it a demon, little g. The Apostle Paul said the Gentiles worship devils, you know, and I don't think people have the understanding that they need. Let's get into the whole point now, too, that we're dealing with Islam, and Islam, people should just read the parts of the Quran that absolutely demand that infidels have their heads cut off or be extorted. Now look, isn't it interesting, you compare the blood of the sword and submission, and the Bible teaches to love your enemies. Now look, I believe that there's a time when Jesus came, you know, as the Lamb of God. The next time Jesus returns, He's returning as a Lion of Judah. And when the Lord said, "There's never been a time like this, nor would be again, that if the days weren't shortened, there'd be no flesh left alive." When I started dealing with that, and I did, on talk radio 20 years ago, people could not believe that. They'll never have cloning. You're crazy, Quayle. You know, blah, blah, blah. So the bottom line is that 20 years now later, they're literally seeing the thing they mocked come before their eye. And do you know how they want to deal with it, Dave? They want to turn away from it, deny it, and move on with a life of basically filled with everything they can fill it with. Drugs, sex, whatever, power, money, you know, position, prestige. And now the billionaires, as you look on Drudge, their number one expenditure, and it's in the billions, is to live forever, because they're believing the lie of the one who controls a lot of them. "Ye shall not surely die, you shall be as gods." Well, when you get someone with an ego as big as his multi-billion-dollar bank account, let's just say this, most of those guys, they may come off publicly benevolent, but underneath the veneer, you know, it's kind of like lizards walking. It's not human skin. So what I'm saying is this, is that the technology of the fallen angels is what caused them to mummify their remains. Most people don't know that Egyptian pharaohs were considered gods. And before even the flood of Noah, people have a hard time with this, but that they don't realize that there were Table of Kings, the Sumerian Table of Kings. It's on my website. Just type it in, and it goes back 450,000 years. Well, that was something other than the creation of Adam and Eve. So the point is, we'll fight amongst ourselves instead of saying, you know, look, let's take a hard look at this. Because God doesn't say replenish the earth if it wasn't already to replenish. If I said replenish the fuel in your gas tank, it means put more in, right? Or bring it back to full. Well, the point being, and this is critical now, because Hitler hated Christians. Okay, fast forward. If the Egyptians believed that their pharaohs were gods, okay, not gods as we know them, but let's say fallen angels and their offspring, and then do you remember how the entity in the White House was portrayed in the international press when he first won? Do you remember? How did they portray him?
I love that term, entity.
Yeah, well,
you're killing me, Steve.
Well, no, I'm just trying to, give you some stuff. Now, look, Dave, here's the deal. He was portrayed as Pharaoh, okay? When you remember when there was a whole hoopla about his talismans in his pocket, and by the way, he wears a Wahhabi ring, okay? And for people that don't get it, Saudi Arabia is the one funding all this stuff, all the mosques, all the incidents in the background is being funded by them. And so the thing that's interesting is that if I said the word Hanuman, would you know what that meant?
No.
Okay, he carries, please look it up, ladies and gentlemen, don't take my word for it, look it up. He carries a talisman. A talisman is an inanimate object that has supernatural entities or demons attached to it. Hanuman is the monkey god that stands between heaven and earth. Now, I want you to know something. That's what he basically carried as a talisman. When he got elected president, okay, guess who came to him? A bunch of Indians from India and gave him a golden Hanuman statue, claiming that's who they believed he was, okay? You can't make this stuff up, Dave. You can't make it up.
I'm
so
not
you've
the
got
least bit
natural.
surprised.
Yeah,
Steve, I'm not surprised. I mean,
yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
I'm sorry. No, I just want to say this. The book, and I think I said this on Coast to Coast, so it's okay to say it here too. This is the last book I think I'm writing. From now on, as long as I'm alive and God gives me the grace and the ability to fund this stuff, the bottom line is I'm going into video documentaries because I've been called, and this is critical, I've been called by everybody from the History Channel to National Geographic. By the way, it's not flattery. The point is, and I'm not flattering myself, the point is I say, you guys, I'll do it as long as you give me final edit over what I said. Not over your conclusions, but my conclusions. You know, to a man, they didn't, well, we won't let you do that. And I said, so that's why I'm doing my own, you know. And last week, forgive me, 2 weeks ago, since I'm running on probably, I don't know how many hours sleep for the last 72 hours, but, I got a call from 3 different people representing 3 different organizations wanting me basically to tell them everything I know. And I said, gentlemen, why would I do that? Why would I do that? So you can mock God? I said, in your world, everything's an alien, everything's an alien, everything's an alien. But where do the aliens come from? Who created the aliens? And I said, I can tell you this, that history has more evidence to the position that the Bible presents on fallen angels than it does. And you know who some of my biggest critics are? Basically people that say, I don't believe that. I believe the giants never existed. Well, you're stupid. I'm sorry. And to sound like Donald Trump, you're stupid, And for the record, the reason this is critical is that the root of evil has been hidden. God is revealing the root of evil so you can see how the tree is known by the fruit it bears. So if tonight all we got was basically an apology or accept Islam, how can any thinking individual in the United States believe that some woman gets an AR-15 or an M4 conversion, whatever she got, and body armor is sophisticated, and they want to say, well, I think her lawyer wanted to say she's 90 pounds, it couldn't have been it. I'll tell you what, she had to be more than 90 pounds because body armor is not lightweight, okay? And I looked at the weapons. I've been, in the years, I used to own gun stores and everything else, sporting goods stores, indoor shooting ranges, and I can tell you this, I can calculate the cost of that stuff instantly. And my first thought is because they're holographic sights and everything else on their weapons, I said, this is someone who's trained in the use of those weapons. So it wasn't the poor man who's taken in by his loving, controlling, evil wife, the whatever, the queen from hell. I mean, these people had training, and I believe the third person that everyone saw was the handler. I'm going to say this one more time. And the handler is the guy that would make sure that the press got into the house, destroyed the evidence. And listen, I'm talking about very powerful people overseeing this. It's so disingenuous to come on this television screen tonight and claim that, the United States is going to go to war with ISIS. No, we're not. We're funding them. Dave, do you remember you and I said that, and we caught so much crap? Forgive the language, but I'll tell you what, when our brothers and sisters are being slaughtered and murdered, and it's a beyond, and with, I think outside of Franklin Graham and a couple others, there's nobody really nailing it except the alternative press, okay, which we are. And when I see mainstream media being so compromised, acting like a bunch of cockroaches afraid of the light, then I can tell you this, they're agenda-driven, and they will not tell the truth at any cost until, let's say, their brother, sister, friend, relative gets blown up and blown away. And so I'm with you, Dave. And again, this all goes back to the very principle of the Hegelian dialectic, which, by the way, Hitler practiced, okay? You create the problem, you provide the solution, and in providing the solution, you absolutely get what you wanted in the first place. And, most people don't even understand what the Hegelian dialectic is, even though it's played out before your eyes daily. And I maintain, now look, you remember when we did a show a couple of years ago and talking about televisions and, quote, smart TVs, they didn't call them that, but being able to watch you, monitor you. You remember that?
I remember.
We did a show on technology. And I can't tell you, it's kind of like, Mama, don't take my television away. The point being is that if people would just think of 1984 and telepresence, if people would just think about obviously being monitored, if people would remember Marshall McLuhan's statement, the medium is the message. Remember that? He didn't say the medium carries the message. He didn't say the medium broadcasts a message. He said the medium is the message. And the only way you can explain the dumbed down, divorce from reality, virtual reality, identity of people on the social network sites is to understand that they have been largely affected. Our generation, Dave, knew a form of freedom our children will never know. And again,
those days are gone forever, Steve. Those days are not going to return.
They're not going to return. And see, here's the thing. I love what Nehemiah said. Go to the book of Nehemiah. Man, he tells the people of God, fight for your families, fight for your little ones, And I love this. How many times you get emails, man, Dave, I'm right behind you. You tell those people, and I've said this for years, I don't want you behind me. I said, I've had enough knives stuck in my back from people I used to trust. No, get up alongside me so I can see where you're at all times, And again, why this is critical is because the same blueprint that was carried out in Nazi Germany is being carried out here. You cannot separate George Bush Sr.'s father away from the Nazis. You cannot separate the Nazis out of John F. Kennedy's assassination. You cannot believe, whether it's Jack Ruby, whether it's Lee Harvey Oswald, whether it's LBJ, everybody involved with the assassination of JFK at some point was interfacing, taking orders from the Nazis. So if the Nazis control, let's just put it into perspective. Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil. Let me take a sip here. Therefore, the control of money is the control of all evil. It doesn't get any simpler than this. Multinational corporations do not care for borders, language, culture. They have their own world. They seek their own domain. Having what they have isn't enough. They have to have it all. In seeking to have it all, they'll destroy everything and anything that stands in their way. And in my opinion, based on being on talk radio, I think I'm up to 12 books. And by the way, I just like some of those people sometimes that hear all the criticism against me. Just ask people criticizing me, what have they ever done? And you know what, Dave? Most of them have never done anything, and they quote to me, especially the Christian hyenas. Now, I'm not taking on Jesus with that statement, but those who profess their Christianity, they say, well, it's not of works, lest any man should boast. And I correct them and say, no, but James says, show me your works, and I'll believe you have faith. In other words, you can't have works to save you, but when the blood of Jesus and God's promise is accepted, then the man should have some follow-through. And that's the tragedy. The Bible said, let the man whom the Lord has redeemed say so. And guess what? All of a sudden, we have a deaf, dumb, and mute, silent Christendom that is cowering. Now, not everyone's doing that, okay? So, I tell people, Christians, how about this one, Dave? Do you hear this? Should I buy a gun? And doesn't the Bible say that they who live by the sword will die by the sword? Let me answer that one. There's nothing against self-defense in the Bible whatsoever. Peter in the Garden of Gethsemane did not bite off the centurion's servant ear. He cut it off with a sword. Here's the thing. We live in, this is why radical Islam, general Islam, and all Islam is basically waiting for the day, because the idea of giving up and dying is more present in the Christian / what calls itself the Christian community than fighting evil. And the Scripture says in the book of Hebrews, you have not yet resisted evil unto the shedding of blood. That doesn't give anybody a license to kill anybody, but go out and start anything. But I'll tell you what. If God did not allow self-defense, then he would sanction suicide. And
that's really clear. Steve, we got to step aside for a break. Okay. You've got your new book, how the Nazis are taking over because they won World War II, and I want to get into that specifically. But before we do, tell people how they can get a copy of your book.
Well, you can go on Steve Quayle, QUAYLE.com, and click on over on the right side. My headlines are on the left. The right side, probably scroll down a little bit, mid site, you'll see a thing for a big panel ad for Empire Beneath the Ice, and they can click on that. It'll take them to my checkout screen, and Dave, the response has been astonishing. Even some of the people that are emailing me just on reading, the short introduction on the back of the book cover are absolutely saying, I knew it was like this. I knew it was like this. So, it's really critical that people have this information. This is, can I say something? This is the root of evil. The fruit of evil we're putting up with right now. And as you and I were talking off the air, I think I ran over into a break. The point being is that we were seeing we were talking about all these things we're seeing unfold. And again, ladies and gentlemen, when we have done nothing to fight ISIS, you cannot even begin a war when you won't admit who your enemy is. Ask yourself that. Every single part of this administration and I call the administration, I'll have to come up with a new name for them, but everybody concerned with the slaughterhouse, and that's how the world sees us, is absolutely apologizing and stuffing Islam down our throat. By the way, if you notice, I read the list from Carol at the beginning of the show. Isn't it fascinating, Dave, that everybody in a position of power is basically of the Muslim persuasion? Even in DHS. How tough is it going to be when the heads of DHS and the fusion centers basically are given the order to let it fly, meaning go for it, to have already identified Christians, have already identified gun owners, have already got their drones pre-programmed with the coordinates, and I remember fighting the supposed brethren on that one. They would never do that. And then Greg Evenson, bless his heart, and by the way, thank you for everyone praying for him. He's still with us, was told by some of his high-ranking military friends that, they're going to use, this is really tough for people to understand, they're going to use the Air Force against the people of the United States. It's called yard farming. By the way, if you notice how this is playing out, It is revision, and some people have said it's the Fourth Reich, the final Reich, and this is the end of the road. This is how should I say, this is on the precipice of perdition. Dave, we're fighting for any sort of freedom that we might have, and I'm telling you this, I don't believe at this point the country will turn around. And anybody who's telling you, that they're going to have that, like some of the false prophets on, mainstream TV are saying, there's going to be a time of great peace, there's going to be an outpouring. Yeah, if that were based on repentance, I would say amen. But when God gives a nation over to judgment, and when people embrace that which He has specifically spoken against, when history has recorded God's attitude by God's action, the point being is we are in a religious war, rightly so, and basically this is the time that people must make it right and get right with Jesus. And I'm telling you this, it makes me repent. It makes me repent almost, I don't know how many times a day. Lord, help me have the right attitude. This is the harder one. Lord, help me to have the right heart. Lord, show me what to do. Lord, show the brethren what to do. And again, here's what I'm saying. I want to finish this up on self-defense because I don't think I covered it. There is absolutely demand by the living God that a righteous man provide for his family's safety. Now, I know you, Dave. I know you. I know Doug. I know the people I hang with. When I say I hang with, I hope that's not literally, but I mean that I spend time with. I'm changing. I'm taking those words back, Lord. But the point being is that it's fascinating to me that every single one of those guys believes in the right to self-defense. And I think people better read Chuck Baldwin's book on it, because they're counting, they meaning the Department of Homeland Security and everybody is counting on being able to use the, what's that church program that they signed all the churches up, where they're going to tell on their own people. I can't remember the name of it right now.
Well, it's run by NOVAD under DHS. And the name's jumping out of my head, too, but I know exactly what you're talking about. It's another DHS, see something, say something.
Yes, and the point being is, ladies and gentlemen, that's like a vampire going into a blood bank with people that are carrying 16 pints saying, you're my favorite people. That simply means that the vampire gets a double whammy or gets a double dose, and you're going to end up dead. So that's I want to call it civilian inmate program. That's not what it is, but if somebody send me an email because it's important. So here's what we're trying to talk to people about tonight. This is a matter of your life and death. This is a matter of your children's life. I don't know about you, but if someone comes in and starts to make war on my family, and I know men and women of God that are going to do this, they're going to start the other way. And so what Loretta Lynch has done is vilified anybody that even identifies the problem. So how can you fight a war, Mr. Entity, when you won't even admit it is a war? When you won't admit that they're evil, that you won't admit that there's any such thing as someone that wants to take your life. By the way, Michael Savage is coming right out and saying the guy is totally demon-possessed. God bless Michael Savage for saying that, because it's true. And the thing is that and please look up, everybody, tonight, Hanuman, and then type in Obama and Hanuman. Dave, here's the thing. The Nazis, everything from the origin of the swastika, everything that is based on one of the greatest mass murders in history, obviously, and they just don't understand that it came out of his occult realm. And lies and propaganda were so much a part of the Third Reich. I can tell you Hitler's demonized. You can go and read it for yourself. Hitler wanted to have a race of Ubermensch, supermen if you want, and he wanted to basically have his own Aryan warriors in his own Aryan base. And, the thing is this, is he wanted to be human dogs who, he wanted to be the top dog, I guess you'd say, and he wanted to rule all the other dogs. And so when we talk about this, You know, it's important. The Ahnenerbe, let me spell that because I may not be pronouncing it right. Ahnenerbe. And that was the ancestral heritage. Can you imagine Nazi scientists going into Nepal and basically bringing back some of the most spiritual people they could find and putting holes in their forehead looking for the third eye? Can you imagine that?
With Mengele, I could imagine anything.
Yeah,
Steve,
but this is Mengele. This is the Ahnenerbe. Then you get into, Himmler's demons, and the SS, which was supposedly Schutzstaffel. It really was Schwarzenson, which means black sun. Black sun, okay? And what's fascinating to me, every single one of these guys was in either one of the Thule societies. The idea was that they were better than everybody else. The idea was they get rid of everybody else. Does that sound familiar? And so that's exactly what the New World Order is doing. And I can tell people this. I'll guarantee them that if they read this book, it will put everything into perspective for them. Everything. And that was the idea behind it. I've written so much stuff on so many things, and now basically it's fascinating. This thing was started about 8 months ago, and Dave, I tell you this, every day there's a new Hitler revelation. There's a new revelation of his bunker. There's a new revelation of his ancestry. There's a new revelation of his voice. Now, this is interesting. People say, well, I can go watch any World War II reel. Why did they bring out a story about Hitler's voice that was never heard before? Got any ideas?
No.
Okay. So the thing is that in projecting Hitler's voice through all the microphones and everything else, there was a time when Hitler would be not the demon-possessed guy. In essence, there were times when he probably had fits of reality, okay? But the fascinating thing is this recording had never been released until last week. And by the way, the word, thank you, Julie, the word that I was looking for is clergy response
team. Exactly, yeah. Jim
White sent that over to me.
Hey, listen to this, and Jim, I apologize, you were right on that. Steve, we got breaking news, and I know you're going to want to comment on this. Jim White just sent this over to me. In the beginning of tonight's news conference, Obama called for anyone on the no-fly list will be banned from purchasing a firearm.
Well, he's stripping the Second Amendment rights. That's not legal. Somebody's got to challenge that immediately.
And it goes to the Supreme Court, and we know how that goes.
Well, I understand, but Dave, in challenging it, okay, here's the thing. The best we can do is hold back great evil for another day, maybe even another night, maybe even another hour, okay? And if it clicks, let's say something you say or I say or that's discussed in the next hour, if that clicks and it gets somebody to say, oh, I see really, really where we're at. That's what we're all about. Now, I want to make it clear one more time. This thing cannot be turned around. It's too late. What can happen, though, is the prayers of God's people can deliver. God will fight for his people, but he will not protect a nation. I made a statement, I don't know how many years ago, 10 years ago. Some of you who listen to me all the time will know when I made this statement, but I said the day will come when America will fight its wars and God will not be on its side. We will lose battle after battle. We will lose aircraft carriers. We will lose dogfights in the sky. We will lose. And guess what? The entity who is the, by the way, I call him the commandeer and thief, okay, not commander-in-chief, has destroyed the military. But isn't it fascinating? They don't have enough bombs for ISIS. Did you see that story?
Yeah, I did see that, yes.
Yeah, they don't have enough bombs for ISIS, but they can spend countless tens of billions of dollars on weapons and weapon systems for, the civilian military that Obama promised he wanted to have. Remember he said, too, equal to the Army?
Yeah.
Where's the disconnect, Dave? This is another rhetorical question. Where is the disconnect that all these men are coming into the country? And I think the entity made the statement, well, you don't need to be afraid of women and children. You want to bet? If you got some 7-year-old that hates you, that's being trained how to walk up on guys who are handcuffed with their hand and blowing their brains out, listen, I find that distasteful. If you're looking at women like this, queen from hell, and her lawyer, shame on that piece of, legal nonsense. The thing is that he is absolutely redefining the images, okay? And the crime scene, let's take that on too, because we're running out of time. The crime scene was totally pilfered. It's like somebody wanted them to see everything that had been staged, okay? Remember, when you're backing both sides in a war and you're selling your goods to both sides in the war, whoever wins, you've already got the loser's money. Whoever loses, you got the winner's money. And that's been the nature of war, One of my friends used to know one of the heads of the Federal Reserve, the tallest guy in the Federal Reserve's history. I'll just give everybody a hint. And when he was asking about the Republican and the Democrat, this guy said, "Hell, son, we own them all." I'm afraid, Dave, there's too many hell's sons, and they own them all.
Congress is bought off. I mean, they've got their insider trading. They've got everything else. The Supreme Court is controlled by, as you call him, the entity. He's got enough appointments now. They have framed Roberts. They've got something on him. That's the only thing I can use to explain why he does what he does. There's nowhere for the people to turn except to God.
Absolutely. And in that, here's the thing. Don't let 3 to 5% of the people destroy you. I don't know how many real, and I mean this, followers of Jesus are out there. I don't know. That's God's issue, not mine. I mean, there's no way, only He can know. But you'd better stand up for your family. You'd better stand up for your children. You'd better, speak up when the name of Jesus Christ is mocked. You'd better not allow 3 to 5% of them to determine your eternal destiny or your family's safety. And I'm serious. I'm like I don't know. I think I should have some kind of a piece of steel to bite on tonight, Dave, because I'm livid at the language of the left. There you go. Livid at the language of the left. I'm perplexed at the surrender of our military prior to this. I understand pensions, I understand finances, but let me tell you this, everybody, especially those that think you're going to live it out in Costa Rica or wherever you're going to live it out, and I'm talking specifically the military, they're going to control you with the money as they have. How can people have taken the oath to defend this country against all enemies, foreign, domestic, and absolutely not formed a PAC, P-A-C, a political cap, to go out on national television and say this and say this? You know why they won't? Because of their fear for they're not only fearful for their lives, but their retirement. This group of brigands wants to retire you eternally. And I pray for the Christian billionaires out there. I do, and there are a bunch. I pray for the guys who have great wealth out there to step up and say, General, your pension is this. I'll cover your pension for the next 5 years if you lose it due to this, but tell the people what you know. Tell the people what you know. Tell the people what you know. And then do what you need to do. Someone says, well, what are you talking about? I'm saying simply this. The truth in a kingdom of lies stands as a light as the kingdom of darkness overtakes our once great land. Look at chemtrails. Look at everything. By the way, the chemtrails, blah, 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 you might like to know, every single evil chemical that comes out of the labyrinth and the labs of the Nazis. By the way, IG Farben was broken up. And, Dave, I can't cover my whole book in 2 hours, but I can say this, that it's not necessary to if you understand the same thing, the identical root of the Third Reich is here playing out before your very eyes. You're talking about someone in the German history that opened them up to all sorts of evil spirits. We're looking at it now, too. And ladies and gentlemen, there's something wrong. There's something so wrong that the other entity is the P-man, okay, meaning the Pope. When he says what he says about Christians, how dare he even claim to represent the Church of Rome, okay? I'm not a Catholic fan, I'm not a Catholic basher, but I'll tell you one thing, this guy is not who you think he is. He's promoting a one-world government, a one-world religion, and a one-world economy. And I got news for you, Dave. My Bible tells me there's only one guy that's coming along the scene to do that. We're going to have the Antichrist. We're going to have the false prophet. You can argue, if you think this guy, the entity is the Antichrist, I think he's the seat warmer. But I can tell you there's a lot of people responding to me after Coast to Coast that think the same thing. Somehow, somewhere, some way, the demons that inhabit Adolf Hitler are coming back to reanimate, repossess, and absolutely, how should I say this, in their minds, not fail where they failed in the past. And I don't maintain they failed. Basically, Sun Tzu said this, when you're in a war, always feign weakness to win that war. It's a paraphrase, okay? And so the point